Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Planet X News, May 15th, 2020. Folks, I was reading an article this evening that was in the New York Post, and the title of the article was, "The Sun Has Entered a Lockdown Period, which could cause freezing weather and famine, scientists say." And this article is directly related to the solar minimum that we are currently in right now. And they claim that the solar minimum is very deep and there is very little activity on the sun. Well, I beg to differ about the low activity on the sun, and we're going to take a look at that. But let's check out the article first. I'm going to go ahead and move out of here, and we'll jump over to this article. And let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and blow this up. And it says, same thing, title, "The Sun Has Entered a Lockdown Period, which could cause freezing weather and famine." And the article states, "Our sun has gone into a lockdown, which could cause freezing weather, earthquakes, and famine, scientists say. The sun is currently in a period of solar minimum, meaning activity on its surface has fallen dramatically." Normally, whenever they refer to this, they're talking about sunspots, as you'll see. Experts believe we are about to enter the deepest period of sunshine recession. Try to say that 3 times in a row. Ever recorded, as sunspots have virtually disappeared. Another astronomer by the name of Dr. Tony Phillips said, "Solar minimum is underway, and it's a deep one. Sunspots, let's try this one more damn time. Sunspot counts suggest it is one of the deepest of the past centuries. The sun's magnetic field has become weak, allowing extra cosmic rays into our solar system." Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've been talking about that. Well, let's see. Well, for about the last year and a half. And I've been warning people that this is occurring. And the article goes on to state excess cosmic rays pose a health hazard to astronauts and polar air travelers. Look, not many of us are going to be traveling in an airplane up over the poles. It says also that NASA scientists fear it could be a repeat of the Dalton minimum, which happened between 1790 and 1830, leading to periods of brutal cold, crop loss, famine, and powerful volcanic eruptions. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, all of this is absolutely possible in nature, especially dealing with the Earth, because the Earth is always in constant change. It states in the article, temperatures plummeted up to 2 degrees Celsius, 35.6 degrees Fahrenheit, over 20 years, devastating the world's food production. And yes, this did occur. This was a devastating period, and that's in relation to this Dalton minimum. Damn, I am tongue-tied today. Let's get back to the article. On April 10th, 1815, the second largest volcanic eruption in 2,000 years happened at Mount Tambora in Indonesia, killing at least 71,000 people. It also led to the so-called Year Without a Summer in 1816, also nicknamed 1800 and frozen to death. So basically, they recorded snow in the month of July back in 1816. So far this year, the sun has been blank with no sunspots 76% of the time, a rate surpassed only once before in the space age. Last year, when it was 77% blank. So again, folks, they start judging this solar minimum by the number of sunspots that are recorded on the sun. Very low activity, as they say. Well, again, like I said when I opened up this article, I beg to differ. I think our sun is actually showing more activity. Now, let's not get this mixed up. Not more activity as in sunspots, but activity as in coronal mass ejections caused by you know what. The Planet X object that is orbiting our sun. Every 28 days, in that period of time, this object creates multiple coronal mass ejections, which in my eyes, in my opinion, is a lot of sun activity. I monitor the sun every single day of my life. Okay? There is a lot of activity. Let's just get out of this mainstream media mouthpiece article and let's just take a look for ourselves. And we're going to jump over here to the seeds program, and well, let's just take a look. We'll start on the 9th. Okay, well, here we go. And I'm going to go ahead and blow this up so we could get a real good look at it here. I'll put this right in our face. So this is May 9th, and I'm going to just go ahead and click this up 2 speeds, and what are we going to see? Oh, there we go. We're seeing a lot of solar activity in the form of plasma ejections, filament releases, coronal mass ejections. Now, folks, this has been occurring. I've been seeing the uptick for, let's just say about the last 9 months, and I do believe that we are going to continue to see this uptick in coronal mass ejections and, filament releases, and we may eventually see a few X flares. We'll see. But as far as the sun not having any activity or the activity being low, again, I beg to differ. But I'm looking at it in a different perspective. I'm not looking at it as these mainstream scientists do with looking at sunspots. I'm looking at the actual activity that is occurring on the sun. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's jump back. And we looked at the 9th. Let's look at the 10th. Let's see what happened on the 10th. We'll just make this go 2 clicks faster. And again, on the 10th, we see a little bit of a continuation. If you look over in this area to the right, you'll see a little bit of a continuation of the remnants of that coronal mass ejection that we just viewed. So let's go ahead and click back, and let's go to the 11th, and let's see what we find on the 11th. And it looks to be, there was another little puff of a coronal mass ejection. Nothing to write home about, but it still occurred. That is still recorded activity on the sun. Okay, let's jump back. We were on the 11th. Let's go to the 12th. Pop this open for us. As you can see right up here, that's the 12th. Now, this is a very strange looking coronal mass ejection. Actually, me and Mark from Wages World, we were checking this out together the other day. And we kind of noticed something odd lingering within this coronal mass ejection, almost like a spherical ball. I'm not saying that's a Planet X object, because during this 28-day orbital pathway that it has around the sun, it would not be in this location. So this is kind of odd what we're looking at, and you could actually see whatever that is, it is rotating. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just shrink this down so I could work the player features right here, and I'm going to stop it. Now let's back up just a little bit, and I'm going to center my attention right here where you see me circling Okay, so you keep your eyes on this area right here. And we're going to go forward frame by frame. So remember, keep your eyes on this area right here. And let's see what we see there. So we start to see something forming. You can see the sphere or circle or ball type feature there. Let's go one more frame. You could see it just a little bit more. Nothing confirmed. You can see it just a little bit more right there. Now you can see it just a little bit more clearer. And it's actually more circular. So let's not hesitate. Let's blow that damn thing up and let's take a look at it. Oops. Screen got out of control. Now you see, that looks like a perfect sphere of some kind. Now, according to the Planet X 28-day orbital cycle, it would not be possible for that object to be one of our known objects. So, you know, folks, it's always fascinating to look at these coronagraphs and study these coronagraphs frame by frame, because we do not truly know what is out there. I personally do not rely on mainstream science, and I sure as hell do not rely on astronomers, okay, scientific mouthpieces that rely on government funding, and they will say and do whatever they're told. Now, if you concentrate your eyes just a little bit, not only do you see a round sphere here, you also start to see what looks to be a round sphere right next to it, larger. Right there. And right there. Now, could this be an illusion? A trick of light? Maybe something in the recording momentarily, one frame of this coronal mass ejection, making it look like two spheres next to each other. You know, the odds of that, I don't know. You know, I would say very unlikely. But what are these objects? I mean, they are completely out of the timeline of what I've been researching and recording on this 28-day orbit over the last 3.5, close to 4 years now. So I'm going to go ahead and shrink this down so I could use the controls for the player. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take some screenshots of this later on, and I'm going to dissect it a little bit better with one of my photo programs, and I'm going to see closely what I can find. But let's go to the next frame. So the next frame is a source of additional light that is flashing out. So we kind of lose whatever was there. So I'm going to go back, and then we'll go forward, back, and then forward. So I will see what is there. So let's move to the next frame. And then you kind of see the larger object has disappeared. You can barely make out what that little smaller object was. And if you continue on through, it kind of disappears. But it kind of looks like it's moving outward about right there. And again, you know, I'm just speculating here. I could not say 100%, you know, that was any kind of planetary object, Planet X, stellar core type object. But it was a very odd looking coronal mass ejection. If you take a look at how long it stretched out, folks, that's probably 500, 600,000, 700,000 miles away from the sun. Because remember, if you look over here to the right, that white circle is the size of the sun behind the occulter. So if you actually take that white circle and transfer it over here, the sun is 865,000 miles across in diameter. So if you take that little distance that you see with my cursor right here, and you put it right here, you could see that, the perspective may be off a little bit, but it was a very, very large, extended coronal mass ejection. Very odd looking. It seemed to be very, very concentrated in this area. And whenever we do detect the Planet X object twice a month, that is what we see. We see these very, very high concentrated coronal mass ejections around the equatorial region of the sun, both left and right. People keep asking me, "Oh, Scott, why do we only see it, on the side of the sun?" Well, I keep answering that question about 10,000 times now, and if people would just listen to me, and I do realize we have some newcomers, but this is the only view that we get from these cameras. Okay, these space cameras that are on the SOHO, LASCO, Coronagraphs, the Solar Dynamics Observatory, the Secchi cameras, the stereo cameras. I mean, this is the view that we get, and those cameras are pointed at the sun. They are there to record coronal mass ejections and activity on the sun. So as we orbit the sun, our perspective, our view changes a little bit, but the view of the cameras doesn't change. They are constantly fixed on the sun. And I'm actually glad that that is how they are fixed, because over the years, that has allowed me to detect this object. See, no other scientist that I know of, no other Planet X researchers that I know of, or wannabe researchers that I know of, even the big names, Gil Broussard, Marshall Masters, Terrell Blackstar, Steve Olson, none of these people have ever shown any of you real observational evidence. That evidence will only be seen right here on Planet X News. And I've done my homework and I've done my research, and I've got some things figured out. But again, this is something that needs constant research, constant observation, and your constant attention. There's no doubt about that. So we were looking at the 12th. Let's take a look at the 13th. And, I could go on and on. I could go back in time on this program, and we can see more and more and more and more activity, daily activity. There are some days where it's relatively low, but I would say just about every day, every other day, we're seeing activity on the sun. We're seeing extensive activity on the sun, but not in the form of sunspots, and that is how they count and calculate this solar minimum. Okay, I'm really not interested that much in the solar minimum. What I am interested in is this activity, because it's activity like this: large coronal mass ejections, large filament releases, X flares. These are the things that affect the Earth instantly within a few days, whereas a solar minimum or a deep solar minimum will take possibly decades, if that. So once again, we can see here on May 13th, more activity, more of a coronal mass ejection extending from the eastern limb of the sun. You have a little bit of activity on the western limb of the sun over here, but the majority you'll see right over here. Again, I consider that activity. Sunspots? No. Okay, we don't have anything yet for the 15th. So that data will roll in. So let's actually, what are all of these advertisements? Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at what some of this activity has produced as far as sightings of this object. Now, I caught this on the 4th of May, And that's little Mercury right there. Now, Mercury is very close to this camera set up on this spacecraft, okay? But it looks like it's right next to this Planet X object, when in fact it's about 38 million miles away from it, okay? So that is how far Mercury is from the sun. Everybody thinks that Mercury is butted up against the sun, but in fact it's not. It's between 36 and 38 million miles from the sun, and it does have a kind of a weird orbit. And if you want to know about the orbit of Mercury, just Google it. But anyways, I spotted this object on the Cactus program. You can see it. You can see it clearly. I mean, there's no denying that that object is there. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next frame because we have some good photos. This one was caught on the Seeds program. Same coronagraph, a little bit of a different time frame. 5/4, May 4th, and bingo. We can clearly see this object caught up in a coronal mass ejection. I'll leave it there on a screen for you for a second. Now, you see this little gray rectangular box right there? Let me go ahead and zoom that in for you. See that little gray box right there? That box is automatically placed in there by the program, and it blocks out extreme light. And that would be light that was being reflected from Mercury. So that little gray box right there is actually covering up Mercury. But as you can see right here, they ain't covering up that. And that's clear as a bell. And that's actually zoomed in all the way. So I'll leave that on the screen there for a second so you guys can meditate on that. So there's no doubt that there is quite a bit of activity on the sun. I personally believe that this object is creating a lot, well, I'd have to say at least 50 to 60, maybe 70% of the activity on the sun. During solar minimums, you know, they say the sun is going to sleep, the sun is quiet, you know, very few sunspots. Forget about the sunspots. Let's take a look at the explosive activity on the sun. That would be in the form of coronal mass ejections, large filament releases, possibly an X-flare. I doubt if we'd see an X-flare at this particular time, but who knows? One of my biggest fears going now is as we come out of this solar minimum and we start moving very quickly into a solar maximum. Well, getting into a solar maximum, wow, now, okay, that's a whole nother story. So when I started detecting this object in deep observations back in 2016, we were in the process of just going from a solar maximum into this solar minimum. So it's been several years now. It's been for almost 5 years. That's pretty close to the halfway point of the solar minimum. Okay, follow me here. I know it may sound a little confusing, but I think that we've reached the halfway point in the minimum. And when you do that, you reach that halfway point in the solar minimum. Now that means that the next half is going to be a gradual increase in solar activity over the next 4 years. But it seems to me that it's not really that gradual. It seems to me that it's been consistent. And it seems to me that it is getting more and more and more active as the weeks go on. So sooner or later, we're going to start seeing large, super large halo coronal mass ejections that will send shock waves of heavily charged particles blasting into the earth. And, you know, me and Mark, we both cover that solar wind, and that's what it's referred to. And there is a lot of scientific evidence that these very, very large bursts of solar wind that impact the Earth's magnetic field. They make their way through, they penetrate into the Earth, and within, 3 to 4 days can cause very, very large earthquakes. And it can also have effects on our weather. And we are already seeing over the past couple of years very strange and erratic things happening with our jet stream, which affects our weather. And the jet stream, naturally affecting our weather, can produce very weird weather situations. It is the middle of May. I'm here in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. Usually we are in the very high 70s, low 80s already. The trees are already in full bloom. Flowers are blooming. Birds are chirping. But it's the complete opposite. All of the trees in my yard, they only have small buds on them, not leaves. The flowers are barely even growing. But we're still getting some sun, but we're also getting colder temperatures. Now, the reason why we're getting the colder temperatures is not because of the solar minimum, it's because of the jet stream and how erratic it is, and these large troughs of cold air coming down from the Arctic through Canada and making their way in these troughs into different parts of the United States. This will also wreak havoc over there in Europe and around the world, and the same thing applies in the southern hemisphere. And as we move further and further into summer in the northern hemisphere, we will continue to see these crazy weather anomalies. And like I said before, over and over again, we will see more weather anomalies, pretty crazy weather anomalies in the southern hemisphere as they are all entering into their deep fall and winter time. So I'll be keeping a close eye on it as we get into June, July, and August. And I believe that we will see some pretty wild times, and there will be a lot to report on. This is a double-decker photograph that I took. This was the photo capture on May 4th from the Coronagraph that we just looked at. One's blown up. And again, folks, if you're doubting that this object exists, okay, you could have all the doubts in the world that you want. But observational evidence right there staring you in the face each and every month on this Planet X News channel shows you the hardcore observational evidence right there in your face. Not some lens flares up in the clouds that people are taking with their cell phones, but this is consistent. Every single month on this channel, twice a month, you will see the evidence. And this is what I'm doing. I'm tracking this object. I am documenting this object, and this is what I want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull this down right here. Okay, there's a nice, good, crisp view. Now this white area that you see here, that's portions of the plasma ejection. And I truly believe that as this object makes its way, and it's in a very sharp, eccentric and elliptical orbit around the sun. I've shown the model many times. And it doesn't pass directly in front of the face of the sun. That's another question that I get constantly. Oh my goodness, how come we can't see it from the Earth? It should be eclipsing the sun. Again, this object is very, very close to the sun. Based on its size and based on the size of the sun and the distance that we are from the sun to the Earth, 93 million miles, 1 astronomical unit, it would be impossible for us to see this object pass in front of the sun and create an eclipse. It's entirely too close to the sun. The sun is bigger than that. So if this object was where, say, for instance, Venus was, or Venus is, then we would definitely see some kind of partial eclipse twice a month. And that would freak people out. But just like anything, ladies and gentlemen, we get used to it. But that's not the situation. That's not the case. Okay, so just giving you an example. If that object was closer to the Earth, yes, we would see partial eclipses twice a month, but it's not. It's very, 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 very close to the sun. So that's why we don't see any of those eclipses. But I wanted to just bring this, this article to your attention. I did see some people talking about, solar minimums and, famine and, the very weird and changing weathers. And, folks, I've been talking about this for a long time. The consistency of the weather changes, how odd they've become. But just like anything, it seems that we as the human race, we're just getting used to it. So I don't see why mainstream, lamestream science has to hide this object. It is probably, in my point of view, the biggest astronomical find in modern science. Forget about finding those black holes that are 1,000 light years away. Who cares about that? Finding something that is in our inner solar system that should be studied, that should be recorded, and we know they're doing that, but they're not letting the public know about it. More of the NASA black ops. But there's no doubt. There shouldn't be any more doubt anymore for all of those people that leave comments and say, "Oh, Planet X is fake." That's all that you've got? That's all that you've got? That it's fake? Well, alrighty then. But I've got, probably hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photographs that I have researched, that I have found myself and recorded and documented since 2016 when I started my deep, deep studies. And I found it, and I've located it. And it took me 3 years to actually figure out that this object is orbiting our sun. Earliest that I could document was it coming in around 2007, being captured by the sun. And I think at that point it was already in a much, much larger orbit. And as each orbit went by, the sun's gravity, slowly pulled it in, and it is set in its orbit, just like it is, just like every other planet in our solar system. But I don't think this object is a planet. I personally think that this is some type of a core type object of a burned out star, maybe similar to a brown dwarf. I don't think that it is a brown dwarf star, but I think it may be something similar. But again, we have the technology to find out truly what it is. And here's something to think about. Just in the course of the last couple of years, the boys in blue at NASA have developed, built, and launched 2 solar probes. One orbiting the sun, the Parker Space Probe, and then the Parker Space Probe, and then the solar orbiter. One making loops around the sun, and one making loops around the poles, north to south, north to south. So, just in a little bit of time, they've gone ahead and built these probes, and they sent them out there to explore the sun. But you know what, ladies and gentlemen? Why didn't they do that 5 years ago? Why didn't they do that 10 years ago? We had the technology. We should always maintain research into our star. Our star gives us life. Our star can take life away. But why over the last 3 years or less has there become this mainstream attention with these probes. NASA's Parker Space Probe heading out to kiss the sun. In my point of view, ladies and gentlemen, they're not going out there to kiss the sun. They're using today's fantastic technology to record this object, to observe this object. And will we ever truly know what it is? Probably not. Unless the space agencies come clean and they show us high-definition photographs. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, if they can take high-definition photographs of Jupiter and Saturn, why not just show us the photographs, NASA? And then me, I can quietly go away because I know that that's what they want. There's no doubt about that. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me your time. I hope you found that all of this information was, pretty interesting, eye-opening, mind-bending. Stay tuned to Planet X News. Share my videos, please. Let others see what we are exploring. Take care, folks.